All right, we are going to get started. I am so excited about this topic and our three speakers. If it's your first time on, I'd love to know how you found out about us. I'd love you to put that in the chat. Recognize several of your faces and your names, and thank you for continuing to hop on every Friday, the Fit Pro Connection. We started this right after COVID hit us all. And I don't even remember the date, and I'm not counting the days or the months because you know why. But we started so that our fitness people in the fitness industry, instructors, trainers, we want to be connected. And it was just like, whoa, when this all hit and the gym's closed and no one was allowed to be around each other. It's like, whoa. So we started it, and every week we have a different panel of awesome speakers and a great topic. And it has been so cool, so fun, so successful, so interesting for us all to be connected. And it's really been fun for me. I'm in Huntington. I live in Mesa, Arizona. My name is Janice Jaicks. I'm the owner of the Fitness Fest Conference and Expo and the owner of Desert Swim School. And for me, it's been super fun. I do live in Mesa, Arizona, but I am over in Huntington Beach, for those of you who tuned in early, where my one daughter and my 1.5-year-old granddaughter live 2 blocks from the beach. And my other daughter, who lives in my neighborhood in Mesa, and my 2 other grandkids, they rented a house right across from her for 2 months. So this is my 3rd trip here. And if you live in the Phoenix area or the Arizona, where many of you do, you know, it is excuse my French, a hellhole right now. It's 116, 115 degrees. You know, 6 o'clock in the morning, it's 100 degrees. So we don't get much relief. So the weather is amazing. And of course, it's just great to be with family. And my granddaughter turned 7 today, so we're here for her birthday. I don't have my earphones, so I may mute and unmute myself here and there, because you may hear a party pretty soon or the waves crashing. So welcome everybody, welcome all the attendees for hopping on. Please use the chat. If you've got any questions, we'd love to get to them. And you know, stay muted if you don't mind, because of the background music. And if you hear crazy noises from me, feel free to say, Janice, shut yourself up, mute yourself. And hopefully our internet stays strong. Gretchen is here monitoring the chat. And let me introduce, well, first of all, we're talking about brain health, hormones, and what is this lack of social interaction doing to us, doing to our children or our grandchildren in my case, now and in the future. So these are hot topics. Hot points we're going to be going through, but as always, the Fit Pro Connection stays positive. Everything's just light and flow. We're all here just to give some opinions, give some advice. So certainly never negative or political. So we always keep it that way. So I'm sure you guys all appreciate that. So I'm going to introduce Samantha. Samantha Parker has an MS degree and is certified yoga therapist. She's a Fitness Fest presenter, and we're going to definitely share the topics that she's talking about this September. She's got a lot of accolades under her name. If she wants to say anything about herself, I'll let her chat when it's her turn to talk. And then Debra Atkinson is one of our Fitness Fest speakers and sponsors, as well as Samantha's a sponsor also, wellness coach and fitness expert, author, and did a TED Talk, for God's sake. So that's pretty cool. Great accolades under her name as well. And Ryan Glatt, Fitness Fest presenter, and he is doing a great postcon on brain health, and just such a great topic. And also a national speaker, works with FAI, the Functional Aging Institute, Neuro Coaching Institute. You know more about yourself than I, so I'll let you guys talk a little bit more about yourself as we move along. And we're going to start with our first question, which is, what is this year's stress doing to our brain health? And we're going to start with Ryan Glatt, our brain health expert, for that hot question.
Thank you, Janice. It's a complicated one, so I'll try to answer it the best I can. you know, we could go at different levels of the brain. We can talk about psychology, we can talk about cognition, we could talk about neuroinflammation, alterations in brain activity. It can be pretty complex. I think we'll start with the mechanisms that probably make the most sense and are probably the most generalized. In terms of behavioral outcomes, if we're looking at cognition, you know, stress can impair certain types of cognition. So things like memory, attention, speed of processing, executive functioning, your ability to plan and organize. We talked about that a bit on the previous episode we did with Cedric and John Ross. And it can interfere with certain types of cognition. And so when people struggle to run their business or run their life or make good, healthy decisions, a lot of it could be stress related. And that's probably because the areas of the brain that are stress sensitive include areas like the prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain, which theoretically houses these executive functions that are really responsible for planning, organizing, short-term memory. But areas like the amygdala, which I think everyone has heard about, part of the limbic regions of the brain, although limbic and reptilian classifications being pretty heavily debated in neuroscience right now. But the amygdala itself, which seems to change its activity and even structure over time in response to stress, is partially responsible perhaps for some of the anxious, fear-based, threatening, or depressive symptoms we might be experiencing. And then areas like the hippocampus, which are responsible for emotional regulation and memory. All three of those areas, and of course the hypothalamus, which we might talk about in the context of hormones and women's health, is also affected by cortisol and stress. And so these are all stress sensitive areas of the brain. And I think it's important to distinguish what is a neurobiological event and what is a personality or a characteristic. And I think people are pretty quick to judge themselves as lazy or stupid or slower, but really this is a neurobiological event and we can do something about it through mind-body approaches such as yoga, which I'm sure we'll discuss some of the mechanisms there, through nutrition, through stress management, through healthy sleep. And then of course, there's other mechanisms like neuroinflammation or inflammatory biomarkers that cross the blood-brain barrier that can trigger a cytokinetic response in the brain. That can be some of the underlying mechanisms behind what the stress around COVID, not COVID itself, but what the stress around COVID could be doing.
Yeah. Oh, I love all the things that you said, and it really makes us think about how we're feeling, where some days we're like, oh God, I'm depressed. And then you just move on and be positive. So can really resonate with a lot of things you said. Thank you, Ryan. Samantha, do you have anything more to say about that?
So yes, I mean, obviously the stressors can be huge. And I think too, because everything, we're not able to get to the gyms like we might typically be able to, even though we're able to get on Zoom and we have maybe some of our favorite trainers being able to provide videos and things like that. I do think that sometimes the whole entire COVID thing and the lack of actual interpersonal interaction is becoming a little bit more problematic for some. So some people need that accountability. But what I have been really trying to work with the people that I work with is trying to remind them, one, yoga, the deep diaphragmatic breathing, obviously helps to calm, reduce the stress and the anxiety. I think a lot of us already kind of know this. One thing that I find very interesting is that there's a research study that was out that showed yoga was one form of exercise better than running, things long, resistance training. It actually produced the most amount of natural GABA. And so GABA is a really short phrase for the one, like the amino acid that I'm not able to pronounce all the way. So, but it's, but GABA is actually the chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. And please correct me if I'm wrong. But it actually helps to reduce, I'm so sorry, I'm not thinking, I can't find it right now. Anyways, it's really good, but it's more natural. So yeah, granted, these days you can get it over the counter, but yoga is actually shown to increase the most natural production of it. And also too, meditation. So as you know, Ryan was mentioning, the cognitive fog, so to speak, that can also help with meditation. So if there's an Alzheimer's website for that's devoted strictly to research in yoga, and they've actually found, they took brain scans pre and post those that were suffering from Alzheimer's and other cognitive functions. But the yoga Kirtan Kriya, so it's a very structured meditation. It involves singing, loud whisperings, and then thought. It includes tactile stimulation, visualization, auditory. And long story, after I believe it was 12 weeks, 12 minutes a day only of this chant, basically they were able to slow, if not reverse, cognitive decline. So I'm thinking that if this is helping with Alzheimer's, it could be extremely beneficial for those of us that are kind of stressing out a little bit these days. You know, just the anxiety and the stress of COVID in general. So I don't know. And also too, I think we all know the benefits of exercise in general. Even just going out for a walk is one of the best things we can do for ourselves. And I think sometimes the American society keeps pushing, oh, well, if you're not able to have all this fancy schmancy equipment, it's not going to benefit you. When in reality, just taking a couple slow, deep breaths, doing this meditation or other forms of meditation that people might find beneficial for them, or just going outside and going for a walk, getting vitamin D, getting fresh air. You know, nature is extremely helpful and healing and very grounding. And for those of us that are more stressed out due to this, I think just being able to be out in nature can be extremely grounding for people. And I believe that's it. But
I think you're spot on. And another thing that you know, segueing to what you're saying is that, you know, you don't have to work out so hard and do boot camp. Like, just like you said, get into nature, take a walk, do yoga, meditate. That's super. Thank you. Deborah, why don't you answer?
Yeah, I do have something to say, although really hard to be the third one to answer after two brilliant people talk. But just that said, so two thoughts while Sam and Ryan were talking was, one, I think we want to be careful when we're working with our clients and talking to ourselves so that we don't contribute to that placebo effect and escalate the talk about how bad it is and the stress. So I think if we can be careful and just be conscious and aware of saying even something like, you know, it's really stressful right now. I know it's really stressful for you. We can reinforce the fact that it is. And maybe if we change that language and just let that go. So don't say the things that people might be thinking anyway, but maybe they're not. So then we don't have to escalate it, and we can point out the silver lining. So it's, you know, the placebo effect, the book by, or You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza, you know, really powerful in how we think about things and just, I think, not contributing, because you can go through your timeline on any social media and find everybody is talking about stress and how bad it is, how stressful it is. But if we can just pause, you know, there are some positive moments in this. And if we can really dwell on those and what we can do right now, and the fact we've got moments where people can and should be paying more attention to their health right now than they ever have in the world before. So I think we can all contribute to that because they're looking to us for leadership. So your voice is really important. And the second is very coincidental, but there's no accidents. I interviewed Dr. Tom O'Brien yesterday for a Flipping 50 podcast, and we were talking about his book, The Fix Your Brain, and, you know, all of the things where we laugh about, you know, not being able to find our phone when it's in our hand, you know, not being able to find our glasses when they're on our head. And, you know, he said, that is, we've got to acknowledge the fact that that's normal. or it's common, but it's not normal. So even if we say, well, I'm getting old, and so of course I do, we set up the expectation that that's true, but it's really not. But now that we do have this time that we're in, that obviously there may be more stressors in our lives because of jobs or finance or uncertainty, certainly, it's actually a wonderful time to take advantage of. There are things that I'm already doing, contributing to my stress, that deteriorates my brain, that I can actually do something about, like setting limits on how much you're using this, setting limits on not putting electromagnetics in your ear next to your brain, you know, and drawing some boundaries about those things that we do have control of, because we've lost a little control elsewhere. And that may be a good, right now, a great conversation for, you know, bringing that into the physical things you're doing with people and just reminding them there are little things you can do if you're forgetful or feeling like you don't have an anchor, which I know when we first kind of, the pandemic and COVID hit, that was the thing I heard most often, is that doing Zoom classes or meeting online was such an anchor for people, because suddenly their lives were like, there's no commute, there's no have to be here at this time. And so just having the regular exercise or regular check-in was such an anchor. And I think we can do that some more going forward with little pieces of wellness fit into our fitness.
I love everything that you're saying. My granddaughter just come in. You want to say hi, Lexi? So let her say hi, because it's her birthday today. So
Okay.
She's
Happy
not
birthday.
okay. Now get lost. Go close the door. I'm just kidding. I love it. Sorry, guys. Sorry, not sorry. I love what you're saying, Deborah. And we have to remember that two things, how I resonate with what you're saying. The leadership, why we got, we have to remember that we are leaders, and even if we are hurting or we are stressed, that we can't pass that on to our clients and our students, if we in fact have any right now, whether it's virtual or live. So, and then also about the boundary setting. And, I remember one time when you and I were trying to set an appointment, you said, after 6 p.m. And what a hard worker you are, amazingly hard worker. So, but you said, no, I can't talk after 6 p.m. because that's when I go off the grid. I'm like, oh, you go, girl, because I am not like that. And I need to be. And so thank you for saying that. So I'll try to change so I said, oh, good for you, setting your own boundaries. So, all right.
My pajamas right there. Yeah.
What's that?
So I'm probably getting into my pajamas right at that time.
Yeah. Well, you get up so early. That could be it too. So, all right, great answers from our three speakers. I know there's more that we're going to move on to number 2. How does yoga? And we kind of already talked about this, but we're going to continue with it. How does yoga and other forms of exercise help with stress triggers? Samantha, you're our yoga therapist. You want to continue talking a little bit more about that? I know you already talked about it a little bit, but go for it.
Yes, so I thank you to who posted the Kirtan Kriya technique, 12 minutes. They just posted it into the chat. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So yes, besides the meditation and yoga in general, I believe that many of us may know already that emotional stress and mental stress that we experience will manifest physically within the body. And that will end up creating a lot of tension, especially maybe the lower backs, especially for those of us that may be working from home now and maybe like in the sofa and then in chairs that we're not typically used to, or, heights with the desk and things like that. So it can lead to many issues in the lower back, maybe the neck, headaches, things along those lines that kind of sneak up on us over time. And I, again, I used to tell my patients, I used to give them like homework, or a prescription for just doing 5 sun salutations in the morning when they wake up, throughout their day whenever they needed to, and then in the evening time. And then especially I gave them like some extra ones in the evening to really help to release that tension within the hips and then the lower back and the hip flexors. And I go along with this as well. Many of us, I also believe, to know about mindfulness. I think sometimes people have this thought that mindfulness, we have to sit still and be like almost kind of meditate. And mindful meditation is sometimes blurred, kind of some at the same thing, what I have found with people that I've worked with. And when I explain to them, no, mindfulness is just knowing, hey, it's now an hour, whether they have to set their clock or whatever. Oh, it's an hour. I need to get up and move in some capacity, or I just need to sit back and breathe. And I believe that that's what yoga is actually, if when you break it down, is to join, to yoke. So to join the mind and the body, which helps with the mindfulness, and the brain is finally able to pay attention to what the body is actually trying to tell us. And as many of us know, these bodies are absolutely amazing machines, but yet we Wikipedia'd something or WebMD'd it, so we don't listen to what our bodies are trying to tell us. And I think too, with everything else going on these days, you know, just the difference of the situations, how we're having to adapt. I don't know about y'all, but the last minute plans I've had to be good, like literally, oh, okay, I have to be work at 24 hours, but I have no idea what my schedule will be from there on out. You know, I kind of also joke around that yoga helps us to become more flexible, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And it really helps us to be able to help the brain learn and pay attention more to what the body is doing, but then have a better understanding of what's going on, and almost so we don't have to go into anxiety mode or panic mode, if that kind of correlates. And so, yes, and then exercise, obviously, I mean, the amount of just going out for a quick brisk walk, again, with the grounding, but also too, it helps, you know, exercise is shown to increase neurotransmitters, neurogenesis, and also meditation. It goes back to the yoga, the Kirti and Kriya, but also exercise in general. I can't remember, I got to look up that research study, but I believe it was running, something along those lines. But it also does improve gray and white matter of the brain, which does improve cognitive function on multiple different levels. So whatever you do, just breathe. And I think too, again, people kind of keep thinking like they've got to do these, I don't want to call them crazy yoga flows on TV, or you see them on YouTube, you know, and they're doing all these amazing cool poses. Just sitting in your chair and just doing some reaching and just doing some nice, easy spinal twists can be extremely beneficial. And again, I think, you know, I try to encourage people, you don't have to feel overwhelmed about this. We can work them into daily doses throughout our day, so we can be more preventative instead of reactive.
That's awesome, Samantha. Thank you. My favorite yoga pose is the child's pose, as a matter of fact. And I've been lucky enough from the beginning of COVID, almost every week, once or twice a week, we've had a private yoga instructor go to the park in the shade, if you can find it. I'm not going to tell you where the shade is, because there is one piece of it in Phoenix, and not sharing, or the backyard kind of thing. And I think it's really helped me stay grounded, and all that. So appreciate that, Samantha. Deborah, I know that I've seen you, you know, on social media, you hike, you do yoga poses, you swim. So why don't you continue in this conversation? I won't make you last. Your turn now.
So yeah, you know, I think I started doing, at the beginning of COVID, I was doing a 4 o'clock yoga, like for a month, every single day. And it was so grounding, but it was also kind of, it was too much for me. So I had to kind of forfeit that. But I think truly, when I teach yoga, I am always reminded that probably one of the most important reasons people tune into it and feel better, there's the physical piece, like moving your limbs and loosening things up. But I think it is someone has to tell us to breathe deeply in and breathe deeply out again and again for a short period of time. And that turning on that parasympathetic nervous system, which is so very easy. And I think, who was it? Julia, I think maybe, who said to help the digestive system. I mean, even a few deep breaths before you have your dinner really sets you up for having the right digestive enzymes. But I think it's about, you know, just that both physical and mental time management, physical energy management. And that's, I think, one of the biggest benefits. And it doesn't matter if you're doing restorative on the floor or you're actually doing a more active or vigorous yoga. And we'll get into this, I'm sure, later as we talk about hormones, but everything Samantha said is right in alignment with, you know, it doesn't have to be hard. And in fact, right now, there may be some good reasons why hard is not the thing to boost our immunity or to balance our hormones naturally.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. Good shares, good takes on that. Thank you. Ryan, we're going to move on to you. And before we ask you this question, I think you might, there's something from the chat and I didn't want to miss it. I didn't want to forget to go back to it. And you might be the best one to answer this. What are symptoms of neuroinflammation?
Yeah, so neuroinflammation isn't something where it's a specific set of symptoms. Neuroinflammation has been proposed as a set of mechanisms that may underlie stress, depression, neurodegenerative disease, neurological conditions. And so psychiatry has really moved, and neuropsychiatry has moved from more of the dopamine hypothesis, which is what antidepressant medication is built on, which is really a neurotransmitter basis of thinking, to more of a neuroinflammation mechanism of thinking. Both are lacking in their own ways. There's pros and cons to thinking about them in that way. Just like there's pros and cons to thinking about the effects of exercise just around neurotransmitters. And I also want to play around with the ideas of, you know, more or less GABA, more or less dopamine, acetylcholine, et cetera. And I think theoretically there's some different acute variables, including exercise type, frequency, intensity, duration, that may modulate those. So to answer that question, before I talk about exercise and neuroinflammation, there's no specific symptoms. It's just thought to underlie a lot of different stuff. And it's a natural mechanism that our brains have, just like our bodies have, in response to threats within the body. That can be viral, that can be bacterial, but oftentimes it can be stress-induced. It can be in response to neurological mechanisms that are trying to downregulate healthy brain function, to put it briefly. In terms of exercise, I'm actually doing my dissertation on the effects of exercise on neuroinflammation. So I've been diving as deep into this as I can. And while more research is needed, as is for everything, what's interesting is that there's some studies showing that high intensity exercise, for instance, may decrease very highly elevated levels of neuroinflammatory biomarkers like C-reactive protein or CRP, but increase things like IL-6 or interleukin-6. And so we know potentially that different types of exercise might have different effects. I think what we're getting from this is that our industry pre-COVID and maybe now is obsessed with high intensity interval training. That may not always be the right answer. Maybe you're experiencing more neuroinflammatory, your neuroinflammatory profile has changed. Your autonomic nervous system profile and status has changed. Your psychological profile has changed. And so the exercise prescription that you or your clients need right now will likely be different because of that. It's not to villainize or worship any one particular type, but I think the answer is always somewhere in a multimodal exercise program, some part aerobic load, something with resistance, something with mind-body. Underneath that category of mind-body could be, it could be yin or yang type of approach. It could be Tai Chi or it could be tennis, both being skill-based, right? Different skills might yield different effects cognitively. And so what's interesting is that I think we all need some sort of smoothie, if you will. If we took carbs, fats, and proteins, not literally a smoothie, but if we had carbs, fats, and proteins, we know we need some mixture of those. Some people are polarized, saying it's all about fat. Some people are polarized, no carbs, stuff like that. But we all can generally agree some sort of ratio is right for all of us at different points in our life. And I think this is true for exercise. At different points in our life, when our biology changes, we need some percentage ratio of cardiovascular load, some sort of external resistance load. That can include body weight, I suppose, as well, but lifting weights has been found to be differentially beneficial to brain health and psychology and psychological outcomes, and then some sort of mind-body. So the three macros are mind-body, which could include skill or something more restorative, like the restorative yoga practices. It could include resistance training, or it could include aerobic. Of course, we have the subdomains of those. We have steady state training and interval training. We have high intensity, we have low intensity, and the different combinations thereof. So just like nutritionists would play around with a different nutritional plan, I think we need to tap into our exercise prescription and exercise counseling skill sets, which I think as an industry are sort of long forgotten. We're so used to training and delivering technique that we forgot about exercise counseling. So what I appreciate about this conversation is that bringing in more of the restorative practices, which we always knew to be important, might have a greater role at this period of time. I'm done blabbing for now. I think I'm taking up too much time.
Oh, I just phased out. I mean, I didn't intentionally phase out. My internet phased out.
Oh, okay, no worries.
So thank you, Ryan. And I love what you said about just really remembering as we work with clients and students virtually or live, thinking about what they need, because it very well is probably different now. So not just for ourselves, but for our clients and students.
And also maybe emphasizing, you know,
so thank you for that.
How do you look? Instead of saying, how do you look? Are you losing weight? Or, hey, is your pain gone? I think
how do you feel?
How do you feel?
Yeah.
How do you feel after this intervention in particular? It might be that yoga made you bored and you really needed to go for a run. It may be that I'm doing so much boxing, I really need to do yoga. And so I think going by how you feel, both at the micro level and a macro level, is really important. And we can, you know, explain the neurobiological underpinnings of that approach. But I think, you know, it's also not that complicated. If you don't feel good, do something that makes you feel good, right?
Yes. Thank you for adding on to that. I'm gonna, there's a question in the chat that I think Samantha probably would want to answer is, I'm a breath holder. How can I learn to address that?
So in yoga, there's so many different breaths. You know, you've got individual single nostril breathing. Anyways, I always try to reinforce. I think sometimes people want to get too fancy with the breath. And again, when we can just do that deep diaphragmatic breathing from the lower belly and really focus on that breath and make it an equal ratio count. So I'll ask people to try to do it in and out through the nose. If they're not able to, in and out, in through the nose, maybe out through the mouth. If we're actually moving, I kind of tell them, whatever you do, don't hold your breath and pass out on me, because that's kind of almost happened. But if you can place your hands on your belly and try to really push your belly out, because many times when we end up becoming stressed, we'll start to breathe from the chest, and that's our sympathetic nervous system. And so when we breathe and do that deep belly breathing, it stimulates the vagal nerve, which helps to stimulate the parasympathetic system, the feed or breathe system, the feel-good system of the body, overriding the sympathetic nervous system. And also, I kind of tell people, like, this is like a go-to to where you can do this when things get stressful, when you're on a Zoom call in front of your boss. I mean, it's very, like, more discreet besides doing, you know, I don't know, some of your employers or supervisors may look at you a little bit funny when you need to actually hone in and implement that deep diaphragmatic breathing. And the great thing about it is, in the beginning, you can have something to focus on, which is your breath and the slow, steady counts. So you can just start with a slow count of like 1, 2, 3, exhale, 3, 2, 1. And then because it also is a practice, the more efficient you get at it and the more you practice it, the longer these breaths will be able to improve. And so for me personally, if you know that you're a breath holder, this can just help you be more mindful of really drawing out those deep breaths, really trying to get as much air as you can within the lungs. And so hopefully that will work for you.
Perfect. Thank you for that great answer, Samantha. There's a few questions in the chat, but let's finish up our questions, move on to the hormones, and we'll make sure we get to them, and we'll make sure we always put everything, always send a recap email out. So Deborah, Samantha, and Ryan, at the end of it, maybe tomorrow, if there's anything you want to add or your contact information, that's, you want to get that to me so that I can get that to them. And any other questions that we didn't get too deep enough to answer, we'll definitely do that in the recap as well. So we're definitely going to start with Deborah Atkinson on our next question. What can we do to create hormone balance? And be sure to plug your pre-con as well. Go.
Yes, so you all want to, if you're curious about that, you want to come to the pre-con on Thursday. What's the date? The 24th? I think it's the 24th. But yeah, so 8 a.m. to 5, we're going to talk about all the hormones, all the stuff. But I think, and I may say your name incorrectly, but Seely in the chat put something just now about too much high intensity interval training elevates cortisol. So there's kind of a yin yang thing to that. So actually a little bit of, there's a sweet spot, right? So you can do too little interval training, doesn't do enough good. Too much does too much damage. So you want that sweet spot. Unfortunately, it's different for me and for Samantha and for Ryan, and it's different right now than it was in February of 2020 for each of us as well. So it's really a fluid, we've got to make that decision today, really, or this week, about the moment that we're in and how we're feeling from the signs and the symptoms. So your body is never lying. We don't have to go to a lab test, but it's, how are you sleeping? How are you waking up? When you wake up, do you feel like you had a hangover and you don't remember having any of the fun? Do you crash at 10 a.m. and 2 and 4, or even 1 or 2 of those suggest that maybe your adrenals and your cortisol has been working overtime? And so interval training may not be the thing. You may want a little bit more yoga, maybe restorative, maybe you can handle other kinds, or you're going for a walk in nature, which is key. Although, if it's 115, that's probably not going to help your cortisol either. But it's important to look at where you are. And first of all, then what exercise you need. And I think that's probably the theme that's going to be emerging, that if you walk away with one thing today, that's really what it is. It comes down to that. But with cortisol, it's also time of day, specifically for women. So women in menopause is my niche, but we all have this. So both genders have it. 20-somethings can have it. And so if you're 70, it doesn't matter. But if we're exercising in the morning, if our cortisol is doing what it should, we're probably a little bit more alert in the morning. We would all agree that when I have to do my creative stuff, I need to really sit down and focus. I'm going to do better in the morning with that. I can still function in the afternoon. I can have meetings and be social in the afternoon, but it's probably not the best time to edit my book, So if that's true, cortisol is probably doing what it should. It's at its high at about 8 a.m. in the morning, and it should be at its all-time low at 2 a.m. in the morning for a lot of women in midlife, or maybe anyone struggling with some stressors right now that they hadn't counted on. Those can get switched, like somebody turned the dial, right? So it's like days and nights are not quite what they need to be. But if cortisol is optimal, the best time to do high intensity exercise is in the morning. So you're working with it, you already have that energy. So we know it as the stress hormone, but we also need to know it as the energy hormone. So if we can use that stress appropriately, short bits of high intensity interval training, and I'll address Seely's comment about too much and what is too much right now. But if we do high intensity exercise later in the day, especially for women who are in midlife, more susceptible to negative effects of stress, there's something called a pregnenolone steal. And it's not that your body won't let you do the high intensity exercise, it probably will. but there may not be pregnenolone that is needed to help you chill out and relax, because pregnenolone can be used if you don't have enough energy to create cortisol. So then you use it for your workout. And when you want to relax, chill out, calm down, and go to sleep, it's like, no, nothing in the bank here. You're trying to write checks and there's nothing in this account. So that's where you want to look at, okay, you being really careful with timing your exercise, not only looking at the type of the exercise that you're doing. So one of the tenets of Flipping 50 that we use, and I'll teach more about all of those at the pre-con, is interval early or intense early and light late. So just kind of remembering that alliteration can really help when you're deciding what would be the best for me right now. And here's what we know about interval training. So a couple of years ago, the research came out. We've been doing interval training for long enough. We know it's not a trend, it's here to stay, but we also saw when it went up, so did injury rates, because we, at least here in the United States, are a more is better kind of a population. So if I can burn a little fat, if I do it a little bit, then I probably should do more. And we've seen people go to extremes and not allow the recovery of the muscles that allow the fitness to happen. The line is about 45 minutes a week. So after 45 minutes a week of interval training, which might be 3 short sessions of 15 minutes, 2 sessions of 20 to 25 minutes, the injury rate goes up significantly. So you've just got to be very careful. I think somebody mentioned doing intervals in a pool is what I would need to do. And if you're doing it where you are much less likely to risk injury, where there's less impact, you can probably get by with a little bit more. But that's a good rule of thumb for all of us to remember. And remember, it's not a quota. So somebody starting probably doesn't need to start with 45 minutes even. They may need just 10 minutes 1 or 2 times a week to give it a try. So that's a really good example. And we can list, there's a baker's dozen that I go through, and we'll cover that during the pre-con. But the bottom line is almost every one of them points to cortisol. So if we can do anything for somebody, it would be, let's help to modify cortisol, because that then helps the spill that is into insulin, into ghrelin, into leptin, into all of the other sex hormones and testosterone, growth hormone, that affect everything else good that we want to happen. Janice, are you coming back?
Oh, I'm back. Yes.
Okay.
My internet went out again.
Pregnant
It
pause.
keeps going for a second or two. It's crazy. So thank you, Deborah. Like very, very interesting and intriguing stuff. I love what you're saying, and you know, hopefully we'll learn more about it in your pre-con. And I put the information in the chat, and we'll put it in the recap as well. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to Ryan, and of course, Ryan, I want you to shamelessly promote your brain health post-con whenever you feel appropriate. So you want to continue this conversation about hormones?
I do, yeah. And while I'm not an expert, I think we can appreciate neuroendocrinology, the interaction of the nervous system and the system here at the Pacific Brain Health Center where I work. A majority of the patients we see are women, usually postmenopausal, and changes in hormones are, you know, directly related to changes in cognition, especially after 50. So Deborah, we have a lot to talk about. A lot of the, what I often see these individuals missing is a exercise program that was built for their endocrine system, actually, because things like DHEA, estradiol, growth hormone, testosterone, the brain's very sensitive to cortisol, which is a hormone. And so the brain has a lot of receptor sites for these different hormones, including estradiol. And area that's sort of controversial topic is hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, specifically for the purpose, among other things, of course, but primarily for the purpose of enhancing cognition. And so I think when there's an opportunity as far in advance as possible of having an exercise program that's multimodal in nature, because Most of the women I talk to are older, and therefore their views on resistance training aren't exactly up to date, and they often miss that element of their exercise program. But that's only one example. I think high levels of stress and not having enough mind-body exercise is another example, or walking but not getting a high enough intensity of cardiovascular load and having a balance of interval versus steady state training. It's a similar conversation to the one that we were talking about cognition, but that should be sensitive to the individual's endocrine profile as well. And Deborah, I love your approach because it's not, although lab testing is probably recommended and extremely helpful for most, it's not always possible. And you don't lab test to kind of self-select and start feeling better, right? Although it's extremely helpful, and same thing for cognition, although we recommend that people see a neurologist or a mental health or a brain health professional sooner rather than later for diagnostics that subjective feelings may not pick up on. And so we want to see if the exercise intervention of your choice is helping over a 6-month or 12-month period these biomarkers or images, such as brain imaging. But I would say that, people don't think about hormones and the nervous system enough when selecting, modifying, or participating in their exercise program. And I think what this epidemic, this pandemic has done is really force people to think about that. It's no longer about those stereotypical exercise goals that our industry is so accustomed to hearing about and creating solutions for. I think people's goals are really changing because people are struggling to maintain clients. I don't know if it's because fitness isn't important, which I know isn't the answer. I think it's because people are assuming the value proposition pre-COVID is the same during COVID, but during COVID. And I think that if we can respond to that by addressing people's brain health, their autonomic nervous systems, as Samantha was talking about, and their hormonal health, as Deborah was talking about, theoretically, you shouldn't have as a hard time with your business because you're changing your value proposition to be so multifaceted and so valuable and so different than it was prior that I think you're going to help your clients and patients a lot more. In addition to that, I'm not going to elaborate too much further on hormones in the brain, but it's just that it's important to consider hormonal health. My pre-con won't dive too deep into hormones, but it's going to be talking about brain health and exercise. So various words have been thrown around today around neurotransmitters, gray matter, white matter, what matters, who knows, but it's going to be important to distinguish what happens with exercise in the brain. The reason I went for my master's in neuroscience is because I, as a personal trainer, had a really hard time learning about this and parsing through all the research. And so a year ago, I created a course for this purpose, which is to look at the generalized and specific effects of exercise on the brain, but also how to enhance your exercise programs with cognitive training, adding cognitive load to your exercise programs, which early research points to might be very beneficial for cognition than brain training or exercise alone. And then someone asked, what are my 4 pillars to improve brain function? Oh, okay, in a 1, 2, 3 priority. So World Health, I'll just go with what the World Health Organization says. Literally at the top of their list is exercise, 150 minutes a week of moderate to vigorous intensity. We know that. I am more so vouching for a multimodal exercise program than a single mode exercise program. This is especially true if you don't have cognitive impairments and you're younger, which most of us are. If you do have cognitive impairments, a multimodal exercise program may not be as effective, but more research is needed. Then I would say below that is sleep, stress management, and then nutrition. Yes, we could argue, but it's based on evidence weight of what's currently out. So I would say sleep and exercise are the 2 biggest ones. And I see people having massive gaps in their lifestyle programs in regards to brain health. And so Gretchen has graciously posted the pre-conference details there. I'm not a good self-promoter, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ryan. So much great stuff to contribute. I appreciate that. We're going to move on to Samantha. Any comments on the hormones, and feel free to shamelessly promote your workshops and anything else as well. I know you're doing neuroplastic movement. I'm just looking at the April brochure, which is now, of course, September. I still have these hard copies. As anyone would like an April brochure, we have about 200 in the office in Mesa. Killed a few trees on that one, but neuroplastic movement and yoga in motion is what she'll be presenting, and she's also, I think, going to have a virtual booth with us. So we'll talk more about that. This topic is so the whole. Today's Fit Pro Connection. I think we need an hour, but we don't have it. But we'll continue because it's just fascinating. Thank you to our guest speakers. Go ahead, Samantha.
Oh, I didn't hear the very last part of that. I'm sorry. So go ahead.
Sorry, if you have anything to add about hormones?
No, I'm definitely not the expert on hormones. I mean, I know the benefits of what hormones can do. If you feel lethargic, exercise is great for helping boost natural testosterone, production. I mean, I think a lot of us know, like, very similar, the basics of just what exercise can do, stimulating the pituitary gland, helping to increase, natural production of human growth hormone, HGH. And so obviously I will yield to Deborah on all of that. But I have to say, I am so happy to hear Ryan and Deborah. They both have mentioned throughout this that it's really important for us to listen to our bodies. Each of us, as we are on our journeys, we're going to ebb and flow in ways that we are going to either need more high intensity cardio, we're going to need more restorative. And it's really challenging sometimes, I think, to find this perfect cocktail of health. And I also am extremely happy that Ryan and Deborah have mentioned that it is about really incorporating all of it. It's the same thing with, over a healthy body. It's not just the physical, the emotional, the mental, and also the spiritual. And I believe it's the same thing. We need our cardiovascular, we need our resistance, we need our mind body, we need our, yoga, our restorative, our meditation. And actually that's what the YOMO, Yoga in Motion, I created the first yoga program for the DoD for chronic movement recovery program about 4 years ago. And so we were tasked as an interdisciplinary team with more holistic modalities. So we had an acupuncturist, a massage therapist, pain trained psychiatrist, myself was a yoga therapist, and we worked with the patients to help decrease prescription medication use. So there's not a problem with chronic pain and prescription medication use within the military. However, we were tasked with creating it, and we had amazing results. And the movement program incorporates resistance training, it incorporates cardiovascular, it incorporates the mind body, as well as the yoga, the restorative at the end. And there's a whole entire, I've broken it down. It's actually a certification that I'm starting to roll out here, hopefully within the next year. And hopefully I'll be able to offer it a Fitness Fest next year, hopefully in person, right? We can be around humans again. But but it incorporates everything. And from somebody looking from the outside in, I'm like a regular, trainer at the gym or whatever, they'd be like, oh, that's just kind of a boot camp class. However, the secret sauce is more, we're doing cognitive structuring with a biopsychosocial approach to help address their kinesiophobia, which is their fear of movement. And in the whole entire process, we're basically helping to rewire their perception of pain / discomfort. And what I found in all of my years, and I was doing it kind of more naturally, but I realized working in that program that that's what I was really helping people to do, is address that fear of movement and or re-injury. And it seems like, oh, that's so simple. Why, yeah, of course. But I don't think people really understand that they are experiencing it in the movement and in the moment. And this program is actually really extremely beneficial. The research and preliminary data that we had when used in conjunction with the TBI clinic, which is Traumatic Brain Injury Clinic, they had a 12-week program. And in working with special operators, special forces, we were able to double functional outcomes we were able to improve NSI scores, which are neurological behavioral index symptoms, if I believe that's correct, and by 25%, like across the board. We had individuals self-reporting improved quality of life, which is huge for so many people, and actually decreased prescription or decreased use in prescription medication in half the amount of time. So there is such a benefit from exercise. I completely agree. I think that exercise is the biggest thing that, you know, we all need in our lives, and we need to put that first and foremost, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be as readily equipped and as capable as we might be taking care of others that we love if we don't really make this a priority. But again, I think it's fantastic that we are all kind of more on the same page of it's finding that right balance, and we need it all. So it's creating your perfect health cocktail. So I don't remember the days. I think, oh, and the neuroplastic movement is a little bit of the YOMO program. And then
I think you're on.
I think it's Saturday and Sunday.
I think you're on Saturday and Sunday. But yeah, we'll put the website up there. I've got a special that I'm going to offer everybody too. So thank you, Samantha, for adding on. And I don't know if we've probably answered a little bit of it, Deborah, but we'll continue with what might what can we do to create the balance, the hormone balance. So Deborah, you want to add on to anything else you want to say about that?
I think the bottom line still is that it comes back to the biggest one, that male, female, 20, 30, women in menopause or post-menopause, we are all going to have to deal with forever. And probably that is the biggest concern right now is cortisol. And, you know, in part, what I've always said for my clients, and I'm sure many of you say the same to yours, is that, you know, if you have a heartbeat, you're going to have stress, you're going to have cortisol. The meaningful things that you have in your life and the meaningful people cause it. So we don't want to wish it away, but we're looking for the sweet spot. So right now, while there may be some in a basket we hadn't counted on, the goal is to decrease it elsewhere. But where we can't decrease, I think sometimes we forget that we've talked a little bit about serotonin, right? And we're not getting any hugs recently. Hopefully you're getting a little something somewhere else with oxytocin at home.
Excuse me, this is a G-rated show, Deborah.
Well, it's
grandchildren are around.
Thank you.
Get a little something. Okay.
Get a little something. You know, if your serotonin, your oxytocin are up, your cortisol cannot be. So if you know, are humorous, or you're able to tell a joke or a story and lighten up the moment, even in sessions and interactions with people, that too, I don't think we want to negate the little things that you do in being who you are and being able to laugh about those things. So I think still it's always going to be cortisol for a long time for all of us. So if we can do that, the rest of the hormones often will fall in place. And it's never an isolated job. So there's a dirty dozen. We'll talk about it at the pre-con. So come.
Thank you. That's great. And, you know, I love about the laughter and staying positive. And, you know, all through this COVID experience, I'll call it, there's been so many Facebook jokes and videos that are just hysterical. And I've been thriving on them and banking on them to keep me laughing, because, yeah, you could cry about it. You could watch the news every second. But let's just, you know, stay positive and look and use laughter. And, you know, be with family and friends as much as possible. So thank you, Deborah. We're really, like I said, this is a hot topic and we could go on forever, but I'm going to move on to our last question, because I know we want to talk about it. We don't want to spend too much time, even though, because it's already after 4 o'clock, my time, but it's important. And it's been really weighing on me pretty heavily as far as what might all this lack of social interaction be doing to us and to our children. And I teach swim lessons to young kids, and this is really dear to my heart because of my grandkids too, like, virtual school. Virtual school, and if they are going back to school, wearing masks and just not as much hugging and sharing as before. So let's just take a couple minutes, each of you, to talk about that. I'm going to start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, so there's this theory called cognitive reserve, which is like a cognitive gas tank for your brain. And there's a lot of things that are thought to go into that: lifestyle modification, sleep, stress, socialization, educational level, cognitive stimulation. And the more things that are positive that go into it, the higher the gas tank, the longer your brain vitality, or the greater your brain vitality is. So socialization has always been a part of that, but I don't think we really appreciated how big of a role it plays in brain and mental health until we had less of it, or at least it changed. And at least in our clinic, we're finding that a majority of the older adults that we serve, with and without neuropsychiatric conditions, are struggling a lot more. Both cognitively and mentally, and also physically. And I think we're finding how important socialization truly is, and how we've probably underestimated the value of that. As it relates to exercise, I think people recognize that socialization combined with exercise is a very powerful tool for adherence, for cognitive engagement, for the feelings, the positive feelings associated with it, for the feeling of partnership and tribe and all those more softer qualitative elements that we know to be important. There's a great book called The Joy of Movement that talks more about this element. And I think socialization also requires cognitive skills. So if you're like me, you go up to people. I was socially awkward before, but now I go up to people, it's like, oh, it's like you haven't gone to work in a while. It is hard to interface with that a little bit. And socialization is cognitively demanding. It utilizes your cognitive skills and all sorts of different mental functions. And so in addition to being beneficial for brain health as a whole, it's important for cognition and of course psychology. I think that's the thing that everybody can relate to, is their mood has changed with the changes in socialization. So I think we know it's important for
Thank you, Ryan. Awesome.
Yeah, being human is pretty important. And I think
yeah. And at the beginning of all our Fit Pro connections, I was saying that I didn't even realize what a people person I was until I wasn't able to be around them. So Samantha, you wanna talk a little bit about that as well?
I completely agree with Ryan on this. I've got friends of mine who are more introverts. So at the beginning of this, they were like, yes, I get to I don't have to go to work. I can be by myself. This is great. But what I found interesting though too, is that I've got some introverted friends, and I think that this may be why they enjoy being around me, because I'm a total extrovert, right? I kind of draw them out. And what they realized is going to work every day forced them to be an extrovert in a way. And they started to realize, like, I'm really kind of missing out on the forced socialism. But they realized, like, wow, I didn't realize how beneficial it really was to me. And now they're kind of struggling to find ways of becoming more extroverted, more social. And they're coming up with some interesting ways of doing it. Still being a little bit more introvert, but yeah, I think that it's really brought to light too. I don't know about y'all, but I've had other conversations with other fitness professionals going, well, do you think the box gym is dead now? Do you think we're ever going back to a gym? And because there's all of these Zoom, and honestly, I do. I think it may be a little bit slower to get back, but the camaraderie that we have, there's just no denying, human energy. And while we can kind of pick that up via Zoom meetings, which has been a great substitute, it's still not the same thing. And so I believe it just is going to take us a little bit longer to get back there, but I really do think that this is, going to be shifting back into the gyms here hopefully soon. But yeah, so that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Samantha. I agree. Deborah.
Really just a short ad. I think Ryan and Samantha covered it so well, but just to give a kind of a demonstrative story. So I have a membership, and I've had a membership. It wasn't as of COVID, but I've had a membership for 4.5 years online. And yet since COVID, I've bumped up doing lives in our Facebook group. And even if I have people around the world who can't join us live at that time, you know, I spoke to this word earlier, but anchor. It's nice for them to know that they have a community, and even to have me live and know that I did it at 9 a.m. this morning and that it's there for them. Some of them are tuning in even just to sit and watch it, even though they can't at that time of day or that moment. It's the connection. It's definitely that human connection that they're missing and loving, even if they're living in a house full of other people under their roof and they're not even used to that. It's the connection for something else that you're giving them. We can't get everything from every person. So I think, you know, we're all so very hungry for it. And I think the kids probably are most suffering, you know, in terms of interacting with friends, especially those who don't have a lot of siblings right there under one household to interact with. So they need it so much more for growth. And I think the reassurance that their world is okay. So I hope we come up with a solution, a safe one for them, but that helps.
Thank you, Deborah. I think that awesome comments from all our great speakers. There's a lot of things in the chat. We are at around, I don't know what time it is. It's close to 4:15. So I'm going to say that we're going to wrap it up a little bit, but if anyone wants to stick around, if our speakers want to stick around for a few minutes, go to the chat and see any unanswered questions. I did put a special, if by the end of Sunday anyone wants to sign up for Fitness Fest, September 24th through the 27th, if you haven't already, FB25, uppercase FB as in Facebook 25, to save $25. We've got a great lineup. We're going to make it as interactive as possible. We know we just cannot be together in person. We can't gather in big groups. So we created a really special event for you. For those of you who don't know about it, we've got over 100 workshops, some great pre and post cons like Ryan's and Deborah's, and Samantha's got some great workshops going on. So we're hoping you can join us on that. So I'm going to end the meeting. But if you guys want to stick around and answer any specific questions, go ahead and put them in the chat now if we didn't get to it, or anything else anybody wants to say. This was a great Zoom forum, great call. I thank Ryan and Deborah and Samantha so much for their advice, their feedback, their expertise. You guys did a great job, and it was really super informative, and we're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. So thank you to all our attendees. We had a great group, great questions, great interaction going on. So thank you for that.